Hello, good morning. Good morning, good morning. The day finally is here as we introduce our first webinar as TDSH, the Dispute Solutions Hub. It is exciting. It is especially significant for us because it is a new thing altogether. Our webinar today promises to highlight mediation beyond just being an ADR process into becoming an agent and a strategic tool of transformation of lives, transformation of processes, transformation of institutions, transformation of relationships. In fact, I dare say the transformation of the entire ADR practice. We believe, and it is part of our dream, that TDSH will bring a new meaning to the practice of dispute resolution. We believe that ADR will help us to see mediation, will help us to see dispute resolution as not a fight, but a solution to a problem that would inevitably arise amongst persons, because we are social by nature and we are bound to disagree. But disagreement does not mean fight. Disagreement does not mean quarrel. Disagreement means that for a temporary period, we may have a slightly different perspective of what is happening, and we may have a difference of opinion as to how a solution should be brought to that situation. And we believe that mediation especially will be a very efficient tool for helping all persons and parties involved to see the resolution of their process as not the winning of a fight, but as taking one more step to establishing harmony in our society and in all that we do. The other thing I'd like to say about TDSH is that we are part of a new era. Since last year, especially when the whole world was affected by what was called the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown, everyone has been talking of the new normal, the new normal, the new normal, the new normal. And I believe that really we don't essentially have a new normal, because we are not ever going to stop being human. And being human, we are going to naturally be social. But the new normal is not a new normal, but in my view, and in the view of TDSH, it is an expanded and more versatile normal. A normal which is a normal that is now enhanced by new values, by new tools, by new methods, especially thanks to technology, as I said, precipitated by the pandemic experience, and it also sets the background for a new outlook. So I'm delighted to be welcoming all of us to this new thing that we're doing. It's our attempt to bring a new thing into the field of ADR. Now this morning, what we will be doing essentially, and I can't wait to hear our speakers, because I don't think, without being unduly modest, I don't think we could have got any speakers that are more eminently qualified, and I'll tell you why in a while. But this morning we want to look at the transformative power of mediation, because that if you could summarize the objective of TDSH in one sentence, It is that we want to show the world, we want to demonstrate to the world, we want to practice to the world and to the field of ADR and dispute resolution generally that mediation is capable of transforming and renewing lives and relationships. And we are going to have our speakers speak along this line. Our first speaker will talk to us essentially about that transformative power of mediation. And our second speaker, who is more than eminently qualified to do so, will be speaking to us about the fact that does ADR or mediation, does that mean litigation has no more relevance in the world? Or are they at war with one another? I don't believe so. It is not our view in TDSH. We believe that we are all part of a continuum of dispute resolution, and each one has its role. For perhaps we may ask that as TDSH, we believe that even litigation should be approached from a mediatory mindset. Before I go on this morning to introduce our speakers and to get on to the order of the day, I want to say that I am very, very delighted, and I feel a sense of privilege and honor that I have with me at the table today members of our advisory council who are present. The advisory council is the main governance body of the TDSH. These are mediators, arbitrators, practitioners, very highly experienced, highly qualified members of the ADR community. And I feel a sense of privilege that they have agreed to join us on the board of TDSH in what we call our advisory council. I will introduce them very briefly. Now, to my right is Mrs. Yinka Kolade. She is a mediator, an arbitrator, a legal practitioner. She's a CEDA accredited mediator, and she's a very experienced mediator, arbitrator of long standing, especially in the areas of construction. And I want to mention that she was one of the moving factors behind the establishment of the now famous, now well-established Lagos Multi-Door Courthouse in Lagos. And I'm not very used to the way things appear on the screen. I want to say to my right, but I don't know whether it's to my right that it is. But I'm sure she's there, and she can just say a hello, so you know who Mrs. Yinka Kolade is. Just shout a hello, so all that. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. And now, whether to my left or to my right, I don't know, but sitting next to me, whether to my left or to my right, is Mrs. Folashade Ali. Again, I'll tell her something that she does not know today. When I went through her CV a few months ago, I noticed that everybody says FCIAB or something, but she's CAB. So I went to quickly research it, and I found that she's actually a chartered arbitrator. And that is really something that is, put it this way, when you have finished chartering, you are chartered. And I think she's just right at the apex of that institution. And again, it is a privilege to have her on our board as a member of our advisory council, Mrs. Folashade Ali. Thank you very much. And last but not the least, sitting here is a good friend of mine, a fellow coffee lover. I always say that to him because when we met, the thing that brought us together was a common, passionate love, almost addiction, on my part at least, to coffee. And I'm speaking of the venerable Dr. Adeyemi Agbelusi. We call him Rev Doc, and he's here with us this morning. He's a member of our advisory board. He's very well known in international circles in the field of arbitration, mediation, and ADR generally. Dr. Agbelusi, thank you very much for being with us. Now, there are one or two persons that are not here right with me in situ, but other members of our advisory council include Mrs. Titilayo Akisanya, who is an executive coach, an HR consultant, and vice president of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria. I don't know if she'll be able to unmute. Administrators can she unmute and just say hello to us quickly, and then we can. Can we unmute her, Mrs. Titilayo Akisanya, so she can say hello to us and greet us quickly?
Hello, I've not only unmuted, I hope you can see my face as well. It's a delight to be here. Morning.
I'll make a note. You're very welcome. You're welcome. I'll make a note about her being on our advisory council. You know, we talked about TDSH being interested in transforming lives, relationships, institutions. You cannot do that without a strong HR influence and participation. And she and one other person that I'll mention represent that for us. So, Titi, welcome. I'm pleased to say that she's my wife, but that's not why she's on the advisory council. She's on the advisory council because she's an executive coach and HR guru, local and international. Thank you very much, Titi, for being on. There are one or two other members that are not here. As we notice them later, I will mention them. There's Mr. Adeyemi Akisanya, who is a private equity specialist. He's based in the US. He might be able to join us later. There is a time difference constraint. I hope he'll be able to come on later. So without much ado, I will like to go on to introduce us to our first speaker of today, who also, in fact, happens to be the chairman of our advisory council. Mr. Bunmi Oni is a member of the Order of the Niger, which is a Nigerian national award in one of the high categories. He's a consummate business leader with decades of senior management experience in the FMCG industry across supply chain, human resources management, sales and marketing, corporate planning, and general management, including 11 years as CEO of the local subsidiary of a multinational corporation. Currently, he is the managing consultant of Open Wells Limited, which offers tailored consulting service to help companies of all sizes optimize their end-to-end internal business processes and raise organizational effectiveness. I'm sure you're beginning to get a hint of the relevance of his participation to TDSH. Mr. Bunmi Oni is a published author. He has a book called Path to Leadership, and this was published in July 2020. He also works as a mediator, alternative dispute resolution mechanisms with special interest in all categories of commercial disputes and family disputes. He may not like me to say this, but I'll take the liberty to mention that Mr. Bunmi Oni is one of the most skilled negotiators that I have met in my life. And I feel with the rest of the team a sense of privilege that he's not only working with us, He is the chairman of our advisory council. At various times in the past, he has been a member of the governing council of the Redeemers University. He's been chairman of Nigeria's Economic Summit Group. He's a member of UNESCO's International Advisory Board for the Reform of Science, Technology, and Innovation Systems in Nigeria. He's chairman of Nigerian Export Council, and he was once the president of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria. And with great pleasure, as I invite him to make the first presentation, I'm also proud to mention once again, I feel my sense of privilege, that Mr. Bunmi Oni is the chairman of the Advisory Council, TDSH. Mr. Oni, you're welcome. Please go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Yemi, for such an elaborate introduction. I almost didn't quite recognize who you are introducing as you went through it, but here we go. I am, of course, delighted to be a participant at this event, and as I thought about the theme, the transformative power of mediation, I thought the first thing I could do was to try and depict that kind of transformation, even in the title slide. I'm sure that's what is intended to be conveyed in the way that this has been written. Now, I'm glad, as Yemi went on, that he started to talk about our humanity as the heart, as the basis on which a transformation can take place. And therefore, I started by sort of saying, now, the idea of parties in dispute turning to someone else for help is so obvious. So obvious that our progenitors did it without any fanfare. I mean, they did it without any difficulty at all. And in fact, it is said that this system, this process, has been implemented throughout ancient Greece from around the 8th century BC. So it's something that is so native to us as a human race. And in China, it can be traced back to the time of Confucius. Now, the challenge at the time was to develop a system of codification. And some people will argue that for a long time, that still remained what the constraint was. But certainly that is no longer the case. So the question really is, if mediation is not a new concept, how is it now that we say it's transformative? What's the essence of that kind of transformation? And the approach I'd like us to just think about is one that is devoid of any jargons, one that is something that we can all relate to in one way or the other. Now, the first thing is that now of the human endowments that we have as a human race, there are two of such endowments that were designed to complement each other. Now, the first is that we were made for dominion. The maker decided to make us, and he wanted us to dominate the rest of the creatures. But one of the things we tended to miss is the small print, and the small print said you're not required to dominate other humans. Yes, you're made for dominion, by which that's why we get our desire to explore and to conquer. That's why we have such desire to look at the depths of the sea and the heights of Mount Everest and so on. But over time, we have also become obsessed with winning. So whereas that basic endowment was meant for positive use, taken to a bit of extreme, it can become an obsession. And if I have an obsession to win, that's what has led us, for example, into people who use performance-enhancing drugs just to be sure that they win, they come out ahead. Whereas if we all made the effort to support each other and also to exert our best endeavors, sports can become as interesting as it was meant to be. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that we were made for community. Now, Yemi alluded to this earlier on in his introduction. I mean, man was made for community. We were not meant to exist in isolation. And I'll talk a little bit about this later on. I know I have only a few minutes. So we're relational beings. And the way we found out is that teamwork maximizes output. So it actually reinforces the dominion instinct. That is the first of our endowments. So these two are meant to work together. And I think the first witness of this was at Babel, the Tower of Babel, where the creator himself acknowledged that, look, whenever these people got together and they had a common purpose, a common desire, and they exerted themselves to the same degree, nothing would be impossible to them. And in fact, we now find that when people work together in teams, the barriers begin to fall one after the other, and it's almost without limits what can be achieved. But now, these days, because of the obsession that I spoke about earlier on, we now have to learn how to work in a team. And we can see from lesser creatures, for example, just watch geese in flight, and you find that nobody teaches them how to work in a team. And it's only man, really, that has to go to a seminar, that has to go to a business school, and has to go to special conferences in order to learn how to work in a team. Whereas that is what we were made to do. And this reminds me of first the African proverb that said, if you want to walk fast, walk alone, but if you want to walk far, you can walk together. People also say that it takes a village to raise a child. So really, we recognize the power of community. And it's not just an African thing. Rudyard Kipling, who lived a couple of centuries ago, said in his poem, The Winners, said, quote, down to Gehenna or up to the throne, he travels the fastest who travels alone. That conveys exactly the same thought as in the African proverb. So that's the first thing we find. Now, when there's the dispute, what we then find is that those two instincts clash. So the desire to win then trumps the sense of community. So we develop the suboptimal coping mechanism. Now, that's my newest description of litigation, because it's really a system we have designed in order to help us to cope with our inability to suppress such desire to win in favor of community. So rather than work together, we outsource our disputes to people who are empowered and learned as the so-called third-party umpire. And sometimes I wonder whether that is not a salient admission that that third party knows what's important to me better than I do know what is important to me, because she has learned a codified system, and that gives her such power. Now, this is not to say, it's not to say that litigation has no place. Of course it does. I'm sure the next speaker would elaborate on this. I'm not by any means suggesting that, but it is that we can actually make this a powerful tool. So we avoid the slow, inefficient, expensive, antiquated procedures that offers remedies that actually many times fall short. Because when we go to court, yes, I get a ruling and I get some remedies, but many times it actually falls short of what I desire. I was watching television the other day about the inquisition into the toll gates event, and yeah, okay, somebody came up here, had been awarded some money, and he said, yeah, the money was okay, but really that didn't quite satisfy him. And therefore, in that whole process, the authentic time-tested process for settling disputes has become the alternative. Now, how did we travel that distance? Something that was native to us that we only needed to develop, we now call it the alternative, excuse me. Then came COVID-19, which I think allows us to actually locate these things in a perspective. Because 2020 has very, very clearly underscored the fact that we are an interdependent society. And these days, we now learn a new thing, that nobody is safe until we are all safe. And we devise social distancing in order to be able to cope with or to prevent the spread of the disease, which was the right thing to do. But it only fosters what I've called porcupine behavior. You know, the porcupine simply puts out the spines, and because it doesn't want to be hurt. But we now stand the risk that it might even become the normal. I mean, I can remember walking along the sidewalk. Somebody's coming in the opposite direction. Instinctively, you cross the road so that you don't meet another human being. Now, that has deprived us of the sense of touch that is so essential for life. Now we're told that the sense of touch is actually the first sense, the first of our senses to develop, and the only one that we cannot live without. We can live without sight, taste, smell, or any other sense. But the sense of touch is one that we cannot live without, and it's rather like food and water. And that's also why people, one of the most severe punishments you can give to somebody, to a human being, is to put him in solitary confinement. And as we have also seen in the course of last year, the impact that it has on our mental health. I just noticed, I've been in London for a few months, and I noticed coming around this time that you hear a lot of dogs barking, much more than normal. And I just got curious until I read an article from in Sunday Times that said part of the explanation for that was that during the pandemic, a lot of people acquired dogs for the first time. And for the first 6 months of their lives with their owners, these dogs were indoors. And suddenly they could now go outside, and they were not able to see other dogs. And at the sight of any other human being or another dog, they just went barking, which was their own way of expressing their anxiety. So if it has that kind of effect on dogs, you can imagine the effect on human beings, on our mental health. And we have probably not even fully realized the impact that it will have on our mental health going forward. Now, mediation is therefore transformative because it allows us to satisfy both of those human instincts. We can win in community. Now, people talk about win-win, and sometimes it's difficult to even convey the sense of win-win. What I say is that we can win in community. We can win in an interdependent state. We can win together. So I would rather say win in community because that's then easier certainly for me and for many to understand. It allows us to dig deep for self-awareness, to really become self-aware, to become aware of ourselves. Now, self-awareness is one of the first traits of maturity. You really cannot be mature unless you are aware of yourself and the way that your own moods and so on and so forth impact other people, as well as allows us to explore the strengths of the people we call opposition. Now, that opposition may actually be a blessing because they allow us first to see ourselves, and they allow us, it allows us to be able to see what strengths we can learn from in other people. It allows us to expand our creativity and achieve what we cannot achieve alone. It's such a versatile process that we can achieve far more potential outcomes. It's almost like brainstorming. You brainstorm together, you generate sometimes scores of possible outcomes, and then you evaluate each one to find out the degree to which it satisfies the requirements and the interests that you have defined. And it also helps us to subdue the urgent and nourish the important. And we all know that deferred gratification is far better. One of the things that's changed the world, particularly in the younger generation, is that people seek instant gratification, which is not good for building community. So the term mediation is global. The process is universal. Its inherent flexibility transcends historical and national legal norms and systemic differences. But I also know that mediation has to be conducted within a context, and that context is what we need to be conscious of, because that context is what brings it to life and makes it real in getting us to achieve our objectives. So the context determines how mediation is absorbed, how it is applied by mediators, whether it's the legal context, which explains the rapid growth in common law versus the relatively slow uptake in civil law jurisdictions. Right, so therefore, we have TDSH, the Dispute Solutions Hub, because it allows us to rediscover and advance the power of mediation and its practice. It helped us to create a novel standard that creates new and better normal for conflict management, a better way, because it's also systemic. And this one of the things that perhaps during the Q&A we can have an opportunity to discuss a little bit more detail of. This not just as a single process, it is to entrench this the mindset, to entrench mediation as a mindset and as a systemic process within each organization. And the more we build it and write it into our DNA of an organization, the more we write it into the operating procedures, the more we write it into the practice direction, the more it becomes, the more we in fact find that, well, this is what we looked for all along. Why did it take us so long to be able to arrive at this point? Now, let's not be like kids. One of the things I'd say is that our kids today who are 5 years old will be saying to their sons in, I don't know, 30 years time, 40 years time, to say that, oh, when I was a kid, we had this pandemic all over the world, and for a whole year, I didn't go to school. And their kids would say, my goodness, why did it take you guys 1 year to figure out how to make a vaccine? We make it now in a week. So it's the same kind of thing. Once we adopt mediation as a right thing, it helps us to be able to acquire it much more as a process. And that's really what drives the Dispute Solutions Hub, because it's to help clients and users develop, negotiate, and implement effective solutions to disputes. And it does not matter the nature of the dispute. Today, there are only very few kinds of disputes that cannot be mediated. And the scope is just being expanded more and more. Now, people who are on this call, I'm sure, can tell us a little bit more about their experiences in various areas. Now, this is just my own contribution to this subject. I'm sure we can talk a lot more about it, especially the various new areas where mediation is now being applied. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oni. That was very educative, especially realizing that we're speaking of mediation. We're talking of working as a team. I find it very fascinating. I'll not say much more than that at this point. That mediation actually acts as a way of ensuring that we can combine our sense of community with our sense of individuality together in our approach to satisfying our desires to resolve conflicts. And especially when we talk of mediation giving us better normals for conflict management. I'll hold further comments for now. While we've been speaking, I'll just like to say thank you very much to Mr. Oni for that. And please stand by. I'm sure people are going to take you up on some of the things you've said. But before we go further, I want to recognize the fact that since we started, we've since been joined by Mr. Emadike, who is one of the members of the Advisory Council of TDSH. Welcome, Emma. Now, we're going to continue this morning, as I had mentioned earlier, that we have with us Andrew Miller, who is a barrister of over 30 years experience of dealing with and resolving commercial disputes both domestically and internationally. Now, I have known Andrew Miller for just a few months, but he's one of those persons that I have met that I just wonder, is it that we met 30 years ago and we both forgot about it? He doesn't seem such a new person to me. And I'm so glad that he's able to be a part of this important history of what we're doing. He now practices as a mediator and arbitrator internationally, although as you can see from his name, he's a Queen's Counsel, he's a barrister. And his areas are construction, energy, property damage, insurance, and professional negligence. He is both a CEDA and RICS accredited mediator and has been involved in the mediation of disputes since 1995. Such statements have a way of making me feel a bit smaller, considering that some of us hadn't even heard that there was even as much as a thing called mediation even in 1995. So you can imagine he has experience over 150 mediations across a wide range of disputes. And he has acted as a lead mediator in commercial disputes valued from £50,000 to £50 million. He also sits as an arbitrator and is a trustee of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. Andrew has mediated disputes with parties in the UK, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Hong Kong, Lithuania, South Africa, Spain, Turkey, and the USA. He regularly speaks about mediation in the UK as well as internationally. Over the last 2 years, he has been involved with a series of workshops and seminars in India and the judging of several of the prestigious mediation and negotiation competitions held in India. In January 2020, he was invited to speak at the Supreme Court of India on mediation and its relationship with litigation. He is the current Enemy Civil and Commercial Mediator of the Year 2021, which was awarded in September 2020. So with great pleasure and a sense of honor, I'd like to invite my friend and a fellow mediator, a fellow barrister, and both of us are no longer practicing actively as barristers, Andrew Miller, Esquire, Queen's Counsel. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. We can hear you very clearly.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much, Emmy. Just with Bunmi, I struggle to recognize myself when you read out such a lovely introduction, and even more lovely, I'd have to say, because of the very personal nature of it. You're absolutely right. We have only met in the last few months, and of course we've only met virtually, but even via this new medium of meeting someone through the screen, it's still possible to build a friendship. And I agree, it's still possible to think, well, have I known this person before, or perhaps did I know them in a previous life? And if I did, then I hope I can get to know you in a future life as well as the current life. And that goes for everyone on the screen. The honor's mine. It's a privilege to be taking part in this inaugural webinar for TDSH. It's fantastic seeing what is happening around the world in terms of mediation. And it really is around the world. And I actually, although we mediate a lot in the UK, I look on in envy at what is happening in other parts of the world in terms of the absolute enthusiasm there is for mediation. And that is clearly going to be hopefully throughout Africa. It is like, it's hopefully spreading like wildfire in India. And I see Vikram Singh here, who is very much at the forefront of the mediation movement in India. So there are huge things happening, and to a large extent, although as I say, we are users of mediation, and I, like many mediators, are busy mediating. I don't feel the same enthusiasm and the same enthusiasm for growth. So let me see what I'm going to talk about, and I've got some slides I may use. I may pop in and out of it. But when it was said to me by your good self, Emmy, will you speak? We have a webinar on the transformative power of mediation. My sort of gut reaction was to think, well, I'm a commercial mediator. I'm not really a transformative mediator. I don't hold myself up as a transformative mediator. And then I was actually looking at some of what I say about myself on different websites, and see that at different times I have included the word transformative, describing me as a mediator, but I've linked it also to say I'm facilitative, I'm evaluative, I'm transformative, I'm whatever individuals want me to, whatever the parties want me to be. And I think that's the case, but I had to sit back because I'm very conscious that there is a perceived to be a difference between the different styles of mediation throughout the mediation world in different parts. So I had to remind myself, well, what is it that we are talking about when we say transformative mediation? And where better to start than Google? And so what I did was hopefully I can get this running quite quickly. So I looked up a couple of definitions to see what it was all about, or what it was said to be all about. And the first one I found was this, and they're not authoritative definitions. But this one was transformative mediation is mediation's paleo diet. Well, let's pause there. Apparently, I didn't know what a paleo diet was, but I then looked that up. And a paleo diet is a diet of only eating food that could be hunted and scavenged by our ancestors. So I take that meaning as going back to basics, which the next bit says it is. It's a back to basis and root sourced approach to mediation instead of seeking resolution, which would be a settlement agreement that I'm very used to, because of course what I didn't introduce was the vast majority, if not almost all, of my mediations are commercial, and they are seeking a commercial outcome, which if settlement is achieved, is in the form of a written agreement. So what it then tells us is transformative mediation seeks to change, transform party interaction, perception, and approach to conflict. Well, I pause there again because that's what I do, and I have many sort of set pieces that I will say to the parties prior to the mediation day, and I personally ensure that I spend time on the telephone or via Zoom or whatever with the parties. But one of the things that I always tell the parties is that wherever you are today is not at settlement. Wherever you are starting the mediation will not achieve a settlement. And so you and the other side have to move, have to have a change of perception, and that perception may not necessarily be on who is right or who is wrong, but a perception on what the way out of this is. And you'll have to change your approach. because again, most of the mediations I see are either completely entrenched in the litigation process, and that's the majority, or they're about to become entrenched in the litigation process. And so if I look at this definition, well, I have to, as the mediator, I have to change the party interaction as it is. I have to change people's perception, and I have to change their approach to conflict. Otherwise, there will never be a settlement. So unless those things happen, there won't be one. So I'm almost ready to go out and get a badge and a T-shirt now that says I'm a transformative mediator without even realizing it. And so let's look at. I wanted to look at one more definition, and I found this definition. It was the transformative model is perhaps the most vague and difficult to define. It's a position in which the process and understanding of the parties' assumptions and needs are more important than an either-or question, but an and/or. The very question itself is transformed. It involves creativity, perspective, and dialogue. It is experimental. It looks beyond the typical A and B, instead looking at C. And again, I think that's true if you're going to achieve something in a complex commercial dispute, if you're going to achieve a settlement. It's true in all types. I personally don't do family law mediation, but it's certainly true in family law mediation. I've done some community mediation. It's true there. If you're doing something as basic as a dispute between neighbors because of noise, you have to change the way people are looking at it, and which in turn hopefully will lead to a change in behavior. So we've got those definitions there as a background, and so I come back and I now think, well, okay, so my initial gut reaction was, well, can I really be a part of this discussion? I now feel very comfortable because that's what I do. But I'm going to stop my sharing of the screen now because, not least because I've lost count of just how many webinars I've had the fortune to give over the last year, and how many PowerPoints I myself have put up, etc. So I'm going to talk a bit about what it all means to me, and I think that will help with seeing from where I am that I'm not too hung up on what the labels are in terms of mediation, but it's mediation itself. And so I think it's interesting to look, and as I've described, I've been a barrister for 30 years in terms of qualified. In fact, sadly, I'm in my 32nd year, and I struggle when I say that because I'm sure there are many people on this webinar who are about that age or pretty close to it. And I was a mediator, I was a barrister and adversarial barrister, doing trials, doing arbitrations. The Americans would call me a trial attorney because that's effectively what I did. And I changed completely about 5-6 years ago. And really the things that took me down this road, I think, was how I came to view what I was doing and the nature of disputes and seeing what they were. And being a lawyer is great. It's hard work. It generally means you've achieved something academically. Most lawyers would count themselves at being high up on the academic tree. And that gives you an ego. And with that ego, you walk into this world, which is a dispute-orientated world. you don't actually, at whatever age it is, give much thought to it. The only thought you're giving, and most mediators, certainly in the UK, come from a legal background, but the most thought you're giving at the time is to becoming this lawyer, to getting your qualifications. And without knowing it and without thinking about it, and without even sensing it, I would say when you get into it, you find yourself in the heart of a dispute-orientated world. And in that world, there are people who are right, and there are people who are wrong. And there are people who are good, and there are people who are bad. And the problem is that that depends from where you're sitting. It depends from your point of view. It depends, going down to the basics of being a lawyer, it depends on who's instructing you and how you're instructed. But you're not having these thoughts. You're not expanding these thoughts as to why am I thinking my arguments are good and the other side are bad? Why am I thinking, whether it's talking on merits in terms of good and bad rather than morals? You're just in this world. And it's a world of lacking in conciliation. And as I've been in it, what have I also seen going forward? It is that outside of my ivory tower of being a lawyer, the world has become that place. The world is absolutely divided. Countries are divided. Neighborhoods are divided between who is right and who is wrong, who's good, who's bad, and who's going to be a winner and who's going to be a loser. And what's missing from that world is, and whether we're talking about in the legal world, because it's certainly missing, but in the bigger world that we certainly live in, is any leanings toward, or significant leanings toward, conciliation. And that's a huge issue when you're trying to advance mediation, when you're trying to find a conciliatory outcome for something, whether it's a commercial dispute, a family dispute, a community dispute, where you're working not simply looking at a legal system that is geared in one direction towards being dispute orientated, but everything else around you is that way. And so one of the things, what happened to me in terms of deciding that I was going to move towards mediation? Well, there were many things. There were things in my personal life as well as my professional life. But if I look at my professional life, and I was fortunate, I got to see mediation very early as a mediation advocate, and it was in 1995. And I was very junior, and I was dealing with a case. It was actually in Singapore, and I was instructed. I was a junior in the case. There was a QC instructed, and there was an American in-house counsel involved, and he told us about this thing that he wanted to take the dispute to, called mediation. Now, myself and the Queen's Counsel I was working for didn't have a clue if he was talking about medication or meditation or mediation. So although it sounds great that I was involved in mediation since 1995, in 1995, I didn't know what it was. And he gave us a talk about it, which none of us really understood. Certainly that the Silk, who was my mentor, who sadly is no longer with us, when he'd gone out the room, turned to me and, using expletives, said to me what he thought about the conversation that had just taken place and about this so-called mediation process we were about to see. But what then happened was, as there was no one-size-fits-all mediation, what then happened was that we saw a process that both of us were very unfamiliar with, and not something that we had been shown at all, for obvious reason, when we were at university or at bar school, and not something that had been in discussion. But lo and behold, something that led to a commercial dispute that had been running for at least 3 years, that led to that dispute being settled over a period of 3 days or soon thereafter. And that started me on a personal journey of wanting to make use of this process. And I would say that I probably used mediation more than a lot of lawyers of my generation, a lot of barristers, and that I would recommend it quite often and use it quite often, both on my UK work and my international work. I have to say, on my international work, it was probably used more readily than on the UK work. But what I came to see over a long period of time, was actually that I was working as a lawyer on cases that seemed like they were my cases. And there's something hugely wrong in that, because they weren't my case. They were the client's case. I, like so many lawyers, going back to the training and how you are, thought many times, whether consciously or subconsciously, I know best. I can help my client here, but helping the client meant more and more dispute. And what I noticed was, in that time of being a trial attorney and over those 25 plus years, there were quite a few times when I actually won the disputes. And sometimes clients would come up and they would thank you. But that wasn't always, and wasn't necessarily regularly the case. They'd thank you for winning the case. That actually, I could see, was actually quite rare. But what I got to see, and I now teach mediation and mediation advocacy to lawyers, which I think is more important than the mediation itself, teaching or equal. What I came to realize was that in 25 plus years, I never had a single example of a client coming to me and saying, "Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much for keeping us in dispute. Really appreciate everything you've done. I may well have lost my home, my business, my family. I've lost 1, 3, 5 years of my life, but I want to thank you." It did not happen. And that's pretty telling. And what that means in very simple terms is that my work was in part responsible for keeping people in a process that at the end of which they were not happy to have been in. And that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's how lawyers are working all around the world. That's how I worked. Yeah. That's what paid my mortgage, etc. But if you sit back, it doesn't make any sense at all. Because the reality is, no one likes conflict. Or at least very few people like conflict, whether it's in their private lives or their public lives or their business lives. It's not comfortable. So analogy I use when I'm talking about this and to share with you, and I think it goes to transformation, or rather the opposite perhaps of transformation, is to compare what we do, perhaps as lawyers, to what doctors do. And if you go to a doctor, let's say you develop a rash on your arm, and you go to the doctor and you present yourself and you say, "Doctor, I have a rash on my arm." What you're actually saying to the doctor is, before I had this rash, my arm was okay. And doctor, why I'm here is because I don't like this rash. And I want you to put me back in the position before I had the rash. And what a doctor does is give you creams or pills or whatever. And the aim is to make your arm, make that rash go away and make your arm as it was. Now let's contrast that with when you go to a lawyer. You go to a lawyer and you say, "Please help me. I've got a dispute. I was working with these people for years and suddenly they've stopped paying. I was buying these goods for years and they were really good, top quality, and now they're not. I've employed someone and they haven't turned up, they've broken the contract, or they've left my building works for this." And what the person is saying to the lawyer is no different to what a patient says to a doctor. They're actually telling the lawyer, everything was okay before my problem. The problem is the problem. I want to be back where I was. And what the lawyer hears is, or may not hear, but certainly hears that there is a problem. And instead of giving the cream or the pills that may deal with that problem itself, the lawyer will say, "Come with me. I'm about to take you on a journey. We're going to sue the pants off those people. We're going to make their life a misery. We're going to work on this. We're going to do everything we can for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, so you can have a fantastic outcome." And a lawyer, instead of trying to put the person back where they were, will take them on a journey. And in many cases, that journey is years. And it all becomes about the legal dispute rather than the original dispute. And so a transformation takes place. A transformation takes place from being, all I wanted was something that I can put into effect, so I could perhaps start a discussion, so I can get the payments I haven't got, so I can see if we can find a way to make the goods a better quality as they used to be. And you transform into, whatever you are telling me as my client, you are right. Whatever they have done is wrong. You are on the side of good, they are on the side of bad, and let's go down this mode. But unlike the doctor, I'm going to take you down this mode. I'm going to take a lot of money off you, but I'm not even going to determine it for you. I'm going to put you into this determinative mode where every piece of work I do is actually so someone else can make a decision. So I'm transforming you, not simply from the dispute you had with the person. I'm transforming you the whole time with how you work with me. And ultimately, I'm not actually going to come up with a solution. I'm going to put it in the hands of someone called a judge, he or she, or in the hands of an arbitrator or arbitrators, and they'll come up with a solution. And here's the best point, it will have nothing to do with you. It's out of your hands by then. And that's why, that's why no one comes and thanks you. Because by the time most people have gone through the dispute resolution process on any case of any significant size, especially commercial, and I can only talk from my own experience of commercial, by the time they've gone through it, they have forgotten what the dispute was about. they can only remember the legal dispute. And in commercial disputes in the UK, around the world, that often then centers around costs. I did a mediation last week where it hasn't even started. The subject matter was £3.5 million. Costs incurred to date of both sides are in excess of 1.2 million, only on costs. They haven't even started. The whole thing is about that. And so that's the transformation that you are trying to unravel. And that's the huge difficulty being a mediator, certainly being a commercial mediator. But for me, one of the problems, and what Emmy was talking about in terms of what I said is, and what I concentrate, and I've given talks all over the UK and around the world on this point, is if mediation is to have its place, it has to itself understand what is going on in terms of conflict and in terms, and Bunmi spoke about this, in terms of what's going on in the settings where it finds itself. So mediation in the UK and in most parts of the world finds itself sitting in the litigation process. It doesn't find itself separate from it. It begs the question whether it actually is an alternative dispute resolution process. Arbitration is. Parties agree beforehand that if there is a dispute, they will resolve it by arbitration instead of by litigation. So they've made a conscious decision to do that and put that into contracts. Whereas mediation is something generally that comes in as an adjunct, as an add-on to the mediation process. And what that means is that there is a relationship going on at present between mediation and litigation, or perhaps between litigation and mediation. And what that relationship is governed very much by the fact that they are two completely different processes. I spoke about, I used the term determinative. Litigation is a determinative process. Someone in the end determines it. Mediation, as you know, is a process of self-resolution by the parties. When you attach mediation to a determinative process, you've got a blurring of the boundaries. It's difficult then to separate interests from needs. And so that's how it's going forward. And that sort of begs the question the whole time as to how this relationship is working. And I think we need to, certainly in the UK, that there's no getting away. You can't pretend it's there. So I teach that you have to understand the relationship. And that means you have to understand the relationship between not just mediation and litigation, where it fits in and how it fits in, but between mediators and lawyers. And that's really complex and really entwined, because when just pausing there, I gave a talk, I was privileged to give a talk at the Singapore Mediation Center. And they actually, I was talking about the relationship, and they actually saw my talk and said to me, will you change the title of your talk to "Are Lawyers the Enemy of Mediation?" And as it happened, I wasn't willing to, because I've invited quite a few lawyers who are clients. But I knew exactly what they meant, and the slide sort of touched on that. And there are clearly huge advantages to having lawyers at mediation and having lawyers involved. I mean, in one sense, it's a necessity, because mediation is coming, certainly in the UK, mainly from within litigation. But the positives of lawyers is, of course, that they, as mediation does find itself, commercial mediation does find itself within this process, they understand the process, whether it's legal or arbitral. They understand how it works. They speak the language of the process, which is good. To a large extent, not totally, but to a large extent, there is a level of independence, especially in our two-tier system where we have barristers and solicitors. And again, to a large extent, even if they don't always do it, there is an intention to do right by the client. And what we have in most jurisdictions, of course, is professional obligations. So not crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed, and that having lawyers can keep the mediation process in check a bit. But this is the key to it, and this is where we come really to the issue of transformation, and it's the negatives. And the negatives are the ethos by which lawyers work. And I've already spelt it out. They work in a determinative mode where everything is geared towards someone else making a decision. Every pleading is written with a view to proving their side is right, the other side is wrong. Every piece of evidence is put forward, again, to prove the same thing. And this is all happening in the heart of an arena that thrives on dispute. So that's how they do it, that's how they work, that's how they gather evidence to prove their case or disprove someone else's case. And that can only lead to confusion at times as to what mediation is about, as to how to behave in mediation. And so what you see are lawyers often acting in mediation as if they're in litigation. They will act in an adversarial style. They will concentrate on legal positions. They will not be able to make concessions and will not be able to acknowledge weaknesses in the other side's case. And they will put forward good faith arguments because that's what they're used to doing, etc. And they may use the process for the very reason that it's not meant to be used, for fishing, finding out something about the other side's case, flexing their muscles, spinning the mediator, trying to use the mediator to get the mediator to tell the other side they're right and you're wrong. And so you have all that. And what you therefore have to do as a commercial mediator is transform that. And that's the key to it. And I've coined a phrase, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to have used it, but I call it, I don't sit in my commercial mediations telling anyone I'm going to transform them, but I call it getting into settlement mode. And I will use that term. And I will tell the parties that, where they are is in a sense where they're meant to be, because that's the nature of the litigation process. They're meant to be in this conflict. They're meant to be, or it's been designed so that they're meant to be convinced as to the merits of their case and the demerits of the other side's case. But what I want them to do is to move from that. And I tell them settlement mode is something it's different. I tell them in different ways. I tell them that if you don't get into settlement mode, you cannot get an end to this dispute. And I tell them I've started calling myself, I say I'm not a dispute resolver. Let the lawyers call themselves that. I'm a dispute container. I can't change the past. I can't change anything that's happened. So I can't resolve it for you, but I can probably work with you to contain it. But you've got to move into a different mode. You've got to be willing to park who's right, who's wrong. And I would say, and you lawyers have to put down the merits for one side. You don't have to decide that you are wrong on the merits. You can keep that thought, but it's just a thought. You keep it, but you don't concentrate on that thought. You put them down and you find a different way. And so settlement mode is a complete change of ethos, or let's give it another word. It's a transformation. And when we're dealing with lawyers, the way I like to think about that, and I would say to lawyers, something you may not have realized is that the greatest gift that you can give to your clients is the gift of settlement. And sometimes they have to think about that, because the gift of settlement means the case ends. It means no more fees to them. But it's the giving that I stress. It's what you can give to your client. And I say the gift of settlement is the gift that keeps on giving. And that's the mode that you as lawyers have to get yourself into. You have to forget. You might be right. You might be absolutely right on the merit, on points of law.
Excuse me, Andrew. I think I'm going to have to jump in here because we're running against our time.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Can I give me 2 minutes and I will wrap it up? I'm at the end. I'm at the end of the page. Yeah.
That was fine. 2 minutes. Yes, please. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Probably put in the chat, and I wasn't looking at the chat, so my apologies if you did. So it's getting them, it's getting the people. And I think the key to this is, and it's no different than so many things, is you can't necessarily change how people feel about something, how they think about something. But what you can do and what you can aim to do is change how they interact with each other. And that's the transformation. And in doing that, in changing how they interact, you might actually change how they feel about something, about the dispute, and ultimately about how they feel about the other side or the process. And for me, that's what the key to this transformation is, changing perceptions, and it is not changing feelings. And the phrase I use, and I'll finish on this, is sometimes it's just moving to a different chair in the room. You're still in the room. Everything else is still in the room, but you're seeing the room from a different view. And in most rooms, there aren't only 2 chairs. So you've got a choice of where you move or keep moving. And that is if that's not transformative, then I'm not sure what is. So thank you so much for listening. I apologize I've run over. I will more than happily take any questions, and I'll keep the answers short.
Andrew, thank you very much. It just shows that this theme, this topic, this approach is so deep, and it's so rich, and you can imagine that is why a whole TDSH is built on it, because it probably take a lifetime to resolve it. But one thing I'd like to take away from what Andrew has shared with us is that mediation actually transforms the approach to conflict resolution, and also actually helps to transform perceptions of both the parties to the disputes as well as their advisors. I can't help referring to something that he mentioned earlier about mediation and medication and meditation and so on and so forth. And I said, well, they do sound alike, but there is an element of truth there that actually, take it this way, that mediation is the medication. which when applied with sufficient meditation by the persons will bring a transformative approach to the mediation. So mediation is medication applied to conflicts. And in that regard, thank you very much, Andrew. I'm going to steal that and I'm going to use that in some other things. Thank you very much. Once again, while we're here, I'd like to also recognize the fact that we have since been joined online by Mr. Adeyemi Akisanya, who is one of the members of our advisory council, and also by Mr. Paul Onifade from London. And I also want at this time to just recognize, especially because it must have taken quite a bit of time constraints for them to cross over without adding to the carbon footprints or having to go to an airport. People like Vikram, my friend and sister Kathleen from I don't think it's California any longer, maybe Iowa or so, and several others who I can see, Seema Samal and the rest of you. Thank you very much for undertaking the inconvenience to join us. Nelson, thank you. Alan Nelson from South Africa, thank you very much for being here. I'm sure there'll be times for Thanksgiving, for giving thanks later, but I just thought I should recognize the fact that you're here and to let you know that the sacrifice you have made to be with us helps us to be more persuaded that indeed we are on the right tracks. Now, I'd like to post a few housekeeping rules. You may find it easier, and I'd encourage as many of you as possible to start putting down your questions or comments in the chat room, in the chat boxes. It would be helpful. We'll read out the questions and the comments directly from the chats, and we'll be able to save some time. So please go ahead and send in your questions and comments in the chats. You can do that just simply to everyone and put in your question in your chats. You may even find that persons are responding to you on that same platform, and that way we will save some time and we'll also be able to move on quite quickly. We know it is very demanding and of a lot of sacrifice for people to be here bang in the middle of the week, one day away from a long weekend. And so we'd like to be respectful and try to get everyone on their way as quickly as we can. And nonetheless, I'd like to give 2 minutes each, perhaps less, to my advisory council members who are present with me, who may like to make a comment or two on the things that have been said. And I'll again begin on I don't know whether it's my left or my right, I don't know how it appears to you on your screens at home, but I'd like to invite Mrs. Folashade Ali, are you set? Or Mr. Imadike, who's going first? Okay, Imadike, please, you have 2 minutes, please. If you can make it less, fantastic.
Thank you very much. Look, yes, I can see that from the discussion, the challenge is trying to figure out how transformation can be blended with mediation. And I would think that mediation itself, looking at what we have come up with at TDSH, we are trying to be creative. We are indeed trying to have a rethinking mediation. We want to see how we can deliver mediation in another form. How have we been able to identify the impediment in mediation? Like Andrew tried to point out, the internal mechanisms, the internal workings of mediation. There are areas that appear to be a kind of limitation. For instance, parties' mindset. You can't change parties' mindset, but you can tinker with the perception and the way they interact with each other. during mediation. The communication aspect of it, actually. How are you able to meander parties away from their fixation, their fixated mindset, so as to achieve a settlement? In that regard, a mediator needs to be very, very creative. Creative in the sense that you would try to disentangle the knotty points, the knotty areas in that dispute, and try to see how parties are able to be attracted to the creative solutions you are coming up with. Because obviously you are like, as a mediator, you are like a magnet, and you try to attract parties to see the issue in dispute in a way as to actually make them begin to have a rethink, to reassess their position once more. And by so doing, the creativity is coming in, and the transformation at the same time is coming in. So that is what TDSH is trying to come up with, so that at the end of the day, the normal way, the normal approach to mediation will begin to shift towards creativity and transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. That was very good and very helpful. And I'd like to ask Mrs. Ali now. For Lashade Ali, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for the participants for listening. I would like to thank Mr. Bunmi Oni and Andrew Miller for the well-delivered paper. It basically says all that we're here for, TDSH. We're dispute containers, as we've just been told, and not resolvers. As long as we mediators learn that our duty is not to become a resolver, but to try and contain and manage the conflict between the parties, that's what we're here for. We're experienced. The versatility in mediation cannot be overemphasized. It's the party's case, it is not our case. So when you wear that hat, that it is not your case, and you're there neutral, impartial, then we resolve the dispute, and parties eventually settle, rather, and they're happy. I like the analogy that Andrew Miller gave about the doctor and the lawyer. And so long as we lawyers, continue to wear the hat and make life difficult for our clients by trying to bring in technicalities, that's why disputes never get resolved. TDSH is here to manage conflicts, and we hope that we'll be able to do that with the experienced hands that we have and the advisory panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ali. Excellent. Before I ask my next advisory council member to please speak, I'd like to note that our friend Mr. Adeyemi Akisanya says we are speaking about creativity, and that creativity leads to transformation. Thank you very much, Mr. Bayo. And also, W.D. Thompson said, referring specifically to what Andrew Miller mentioned, and I want to quote him from the chat. He says, sometimes it's just moving to a different chair in the room. In most rooms, there are only 2 chairs. And he says, that is powerful imagery. Thank you, Andrew. He says, I usually use the balcony, but this is better. Which means, if I can put the words in his mouth and speak for him, we have one new person, Mr. W or Miss W. Thompson, as the case may be, who is now going to be using the balcony, the chairs, rather than the balcony. Thank you very much. And thank you, Kenneth Oyema, for your comment. Splendid. May I also quickly say to some of our younger members, I do not want to be disrespectful, but I want to say that we will be unable to answer questions like, how do I get into an international mediation career? But you're welcome to speak to us privately, and we can give you some guidelines so that we don't deviate too much from the theme of our program today. I'd like now to turn over very quickly, saying thank you to the previous speakers, not just Mr. Oni and Andrew Miller, and also Mr. DK and Mrs. Folashade Ali. I'd like to now ask Mrs. Yinka Kolade, who is also a member of our advisory council, to please make her comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akisoya. What I would just like to say, and I think this is for both speakers, but maybe more to Mr. Oni for his presentation. My thoughts are, this whole idea of transformation with mediation, or the transformative power of mediation. What does it portend for corporate organizations? I think this is where we bring in the HR people. I think the HR departments, especially for large organizations, will have to get more involved and not just wait for the lawyers or look to the lawyers to perform magic when there is a conflict. I think there should be a reorientation of the workforce so that you have employees who have an understanding of the relationship between litigation and mediation, who understand the cost of conflict and the need of relationships. And so, you have a workforce that is ready. As the Girl Guides will say, be ready. They are ready, and they will be able to apply the language of the ADR processes, to whatever they do, to whatever relationships they, or transactions that they have to go through. And hopefully with this, we'll be able to have better outcomes of conflict, because we will have conflict, because conflict is inevitable, but we'll have better outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Yinka, for that, and I must apologize for distracting you so much, but I was getting lots of comments in the chats that you were not being heard. So I was could you please just repeat your comment? You might need to hold the microphone closer to you. I don't think it's on yet.
Okay. Essentially what I said was, I said that from Mr. Oni's presentation, that what does this portend for corporate organizations? And I think that they will need to get their HR departments to be more involved and not just wait for the lawyers when there's a conflict, or look to the lawyers to perform magic when there is a conflict, in the transactions of the organizations. There should be a reorientation of the workforce so that, we have employees who understand the cost of conflict, who understand the relationship between litigation and mediation, and why, they should choose one over the other, who understand relationships, and who should be thus ready, to apply the ADR process, the workings of the ADR process, to whatever transactions that they're going through, so that hopefully we will have better outcomes in conflict. I mean, conflict is inevitable. We will always have conflict, but then it's the outcome that really matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And again, we must apologize for having to repeat. Just a little technical thing there. Before I go on to the next advisory council member, I just want to note one or two further comments. Kathleen Leedy from the United States says, it is the clarity of the positions and interests and new forward movements that bring transformation to the mediation process. It is the clarity of the positions and interests and new forward movements that bring transformation to the mediation process. Thank you very much for Kathleen. That essentially summarizes all that Mr. Oni as well as Barrister Miller have mentioned in their talks. Thank you very much. And I'd like to quickly remind you that if there are any other persons who have questions or comments, please, I'd like to continue to encourage you, please put them in the chat boxes. And as you've noticed, I will be referring to them from time to time as we go forward. Before we come to the next question and answer session. Now I'd like to turn over to Dr. Adeyemi Akisanya, who's also one of the members of our advisory council, to make his comment.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? Okay, fine, thank you. So I just want to appreciate the comment from Andrew today, which is very, very insightful, and Mr. Bunmi Oni. And I just want to add that the beauty of the mediation process is that it's human-centric in approach, as opposed to dispute-centric, which other forms of adjudication offer. And so the joy of having no judicial precedent and no predetermined codified outcomes as to the application of facts and law makes it such a versatile process that allows for creativity. And there lies the transformation. And the effect, which I took from Andrew's submissions, really, the difference between a settlement and a judgment are profound. You know, I handled a matter that had gone to the Supreme Court and had lasted for 30 years. About 12 disputants and about 7 were dead. And I remember when we settled and signed the ink, one of the disputants said to me, "Now I can go on with my life." You know, and that was so touching to me. I also had a matrimonial matter that they had had the marriage annulled and they had lived apart, but they'd been in court for 7 years because of commercial issues. And when we settled these issues, the husband started crying, the wife started crying, the counsel on both sides started crying. So I said, I'm not going to cry. So I left the room. But the bottom line was that everybody felt a bit better. So I think what TDSH is offering the market is really getting the corporate commercial focus not only on dispute resolution, but on avoidance and management. So we have franchise agreements, we have different HR issues, whatever it is, TDSH is positioned to help you keep costs. I know most of the expenses of firms, about 25 to 30% of costs are on legal and human related factors. So keeping an eye on those costs and enhancing profitability is something that I think TDSH is bringing to the market. And I'm looking forward to a very bright future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akisanya. And again, I'd like to continue to encourage you to please put in your comments and questions, because right now we're going to be going into a question and answer process. But before I go on there, I'd like to say that please, if we get to the point where we are speaking and you're going to speak your question, may I encourage you to keep the question short, just as the speakers have agreed to keep their answers short. So by the same process, I'd like to quickly read out a comment from our advisory council member all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. And he says as follows, that the transformative power of mediation is present in the second order as well, not just in the resolution of the issue, but in the freedom that the resolution provides to its parties to go on and continue their lives and affairs. A productive executive, once trapped in conflict, can now return to value creation and performance improvement at their work. And this is where additional true value lies. Thank you very much, Mr. Adeyemi Akisanya, for that very constructive comment. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. We had greetings from our sister, Jimena Regules. I hope I got that pronunciation right finally. And she sent greetings from Chile in South Africa, not chili pepper, but Chile, the country in South Africa. Thank you. South America, thank you. Did I say South Africa? Yeah. South America, Chile in South America. I guess I was getting Chile. Before we take another question, I have a friend of ours from South Africa, Alan Nelson. Alan, I don't know if you're on. I don't see a comment from you in the chat. Did you want to speak for 2 minutes? If you can manage it, I'd really appreciate it. Would you please unmute Alan for 2 minutes, 120 seconds.
I won't be longer than that, I promise. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and congratulations on a super webinar. Bunmi, well done. And Andrew also. I think I have a very similar background to Andrew's. I think I've just been a barrister for a lot longer, and a very aggressive trial lawyer for a longer period than he has. But for the last 8 years, I've been mediating. I also train mediators for the University of Cape Town. And it's been my experience, if I talk transformation, mediation really gives us the opportunity. And I've mediated family disputes, commercial disputes, community disputes at different levels. And what I've seen is that mediation gives us this amazing opportunity to transform people, to transform families. We change families, we change businesses. You've got conflict in a business environment. Something has gone wrong between role players in a company. You mediate what is a commercial dispute, but at the end of the day, if you do your work properly, you end up placing both of the parties to that dispute in a better position. You place the business itself in a better position, and very often you place the customers to that business in a better position as well. And the same applies to community conflict and peace building. I mean, the amazing ability of mediation to transform, I think, is the unique concept here. And I really want to congratulate you on this notion of linking mediation and transformation, and focusing on the power that mediation has of transforming people's lives. I think therein lies its true value. And I think the most important difference between mediation and litigation. Andrew, just quickly, a very different analogy that I draw often when I train is I say that mediation to the mediator is like a tablet to a doctor. Litigation is like a very big operation. And I often say to my lawyers that I train as mediators, I say, if you as a lawyer, knowing that there is a tablet that you could give that would bring peace and would resolve the problem and take away the pain immediately, if you tell people to litigate, you are not in a different position to the surgeon who puts his patient through a very complex operation at huge cost, at huge trauma, at huge expense, when you know there's a pill that you could have given. And I say, what would you do to a surgeon who doesn't give the pill is what we should do to lawyers that don't recommend mediation. But thank you. It's been a wonderful presentation. I've enjoyed it very much. And I look forward to engaging with all of you at some stage or another in future. And if ever you come to South Africa, you'll always be very welcome here at the Nelson Peace Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan, and you can be very certain that we will engage with you. So it's not may or might or would or whatever it is, we will engage with you. Thank you very much. Now, earlier on, Mrs. Kolade made a comment. She's one of our advisory council members, and she made a comment that referred to the role of the HR departments, that referring to the presentation of Mr. Oni. He says, what does all that portend to corporate organizations? And before I go back to the speakers, I'd like to ask Mrs. Titi Akisanya, if she's still on, to kindly unmute. She's a member of the Advisory Council, TDSH. She's the vice president of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. She's an HR consultant, an executive coach. And I feel that without preempting her, I'd like to ask for her comments now, and I'd like her to please bring an HR perspective in her comment. Thank you, Titi, please. You have 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Very clearly.
Okay. It is with great pleasure and delight that I'm here today. And I would like to say thank you to Andrew Miller and Mr. Bunmi Oni for your presentations and all the comments in the chat box. I've been reading with delight, and also from fellow advisory council members. My contribution is simple in the sense that mediation, transformation, call it whatever, it's all about people. And it's not just about my field. It's to emphasize that people matter. And since people matter, mediation is a transformative act of ensuring that what matters most to people is dealt with. And it really starts from the heart. And that's why it's transformative. And so with that, I'd just like to say to all those who have taken time to log on today, all those who, like me, have taken copious notes, this is just the beginning of learning. But I believe what TDSH is trying to do is impact lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. One thing I'd like to take away from what you've said, I couldn't help capturing that transformation in mediation is actually the process by which we re-enthrone people. She said people matter. We will enthrone people to take the rightful place and displace the undue importance that seems to have been given sometimes to just mere process and procedure. Thank you very much for that, Titi. Absolute wonderful and enlightening presentations, Mr. Diri says, from all the moderators and guest speakers. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to go on to the very first question. And honestly, Mr. Bunmi, Barrister Miller, I really do not know which of you would like to answer this. I know you've promised me to keep your answers short, but either or both of you could answer this actually. The question is there a role for transformative mediation in political and tribal disputes of the sort that are prevalent in Africa? Let me repeat that. Is there a role for transformative mediation in political and tribal disputes of the sort that are prevalent in Africa? Either of you can go first. I think both of you can speak to this. Did you get that? Shall I repeat it?
No, I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I think I'll just like to make a comment. I'm sure Andrew has additional comments, more enriching comments. But I just like to say that sometimes it's curious where an organization makes a big statement that people are most important assets. I'm sure you've heard that a million times. And yet the same organization would say to the HR specialist, well, you hold on, this is business. When we come to talk about HR, we'll give you a voice. And I can't imagine any two statements that are more inconsistent than that. So yeah, directly to Mrs. Kolade's comment, there's absolutely no doubt that the more the HR specialist is at the table rather than on the table, the more the organization will be able to embed this mindset, this reorientation of getting people to look at, to separate the people from the issues, and then you can deal much better with whatever the issues are that confront you. People make a difference, and I think that's not saying anything new at all. And every organization also knows the importance of setting policy, and that's why what that comment feeds to is a conflict management system. within an organization. So you can set them up before a dispute arises. When there's a dispute, that's too late, because then you are distracted by the problems of the moment. And of course, egos come into play and all of that. So yes, there's a huge role for HR people. HR specialists themselves need to get themselves updated on what roles they can play, how they can better prepare their people for various assignments, including the skill in negotiating, the skill in having a conversation with somebody who has an opposite opinion, because that's really what the dispute is about. I have an opinion about something, you have a different opinion. Sometimes it appears clear to one party and not so clear to the other party. But then the challenge is to be able to unveil and uncover those differences, as long as the person is not the enemy. The person is actually an ally that you can bring on to work as a team member. I'll limit it to that, and I'm sure Andrew has a lot more. The other comment about is it workable for politicians? Now the thing is, politicians understand the value of negotiation. That's what they do every day. That's what they thrive on, except when it has to do with vying for a position and so on. They can work together on anything that is of common interest to them. One of the things that have been said, perhaps as a joke, is that in many parliaments, when they discuss issues of themselves, it goes across party lines. It's always bipartisan. But when they have to talk about other things, then the swords come out, and then they bring out their differences. But of course, they do have the capacity. But that mindset, that orientation, needs to be built in before the event happens. For politicians, it's really about focusing on the objective function. The objective function, and that's an operations research term. The objective function is, what is the way, this is the thing that we are all interested in. What is the way to maximize it? So an optimizing mindset would say, what are the alternatives? And when we plug these alternatives into the objective function, which one maximizes the objective function? And in that way, every factor that influences or that makes a contribution to the objective function gets taken into consideration. And there isn't any question of playing up one against the other. The objective function is all the totality of all the factors that is required to make for a resolution. Then you generate all the options and plug all these options into the objective function, and that's because I'm sorry, I'm speaking from a mindset of operations research, but it's exactly the same thing that works in these situations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oni. You might have noticed something I've put in the chat box. Please, if you have any questions or any further comments, please put them in the chat box. If you don't have them now, I've put up the website address of the company, which should enable you to communicate with us. Guaranteed you will get a response. I also want to encourage as many of you to do so. We will respond. And if there are organizations here or amongst our lawyers, if any of your clients are interested in pursuing further this notion that Mr. Oni referred to, that is having in place an effective conflict resolution policy and practice ahead of conflicts arising, please get in touch with us. I believe that we will be able to help you. That is one of our objectives. That's one of our missions that we're aiming at, to help to put that in place. We'll be willing to explore that with you. The website address is there. Please go there. There's an opportunity for you to write in your question and to give your comments. Guaranteed, we will respond to you. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Barrister Miller, please, to go ahead and kindly also respond to the question. I'll repeat that. Is there a role for transformative mediation in political and tribal disputes of the sort prevalent in Africa? Thank you, Mr. Oni. Over to you, Barrister Miller, now.
So I of course, cannot pretend to be an expert on the political and tribal disputes in Africa. So my simple answer is, why not? Why wouldn't you try it? I know disputes have been going for a long time, and so I can't see why it's something that cannot be of help. And I think it's how it's framed. And in a lot of the world, certainly a lot of the UK, if you went and asked someone, what does an arbitrator do, they'd be able to tell you. If you ask what a mediator do, many people won't have an understanding. So there's an issue with the description of it. But as was mentioned earlier, the idea of someone intervening in a problem is totally familiar. It's totally familiar in Africa, in India, in the Middle East, and it was often the village elder. So it's how it's described, but it has to be described with care, because a mediator is, of course, something different. It's not the village elder who then determines the dispute between two parties. It's someone comes in and works with them to try and assist them to transform and to be in a position where they are able to, as I've said, not necessarily resolve the dispute, but contain the dispute going forward. And so I think it's a question of terminology, how it's framed. There's no need to get hung up on the word mediator. It can be the word conciliator. It is someone who is going to be talking to both sides. The difficulty in all of this is the notion, which may sound, I think, familiar to us or feel familiar to us, which is the notion of a person who can come in and be independent and neutral. And that is, we may take that for granted, but that isn't taken for granted anywhere. So one of the countries that was read out that I actually mediated in, the parties could not get their heads around. It was an Eastern European country. They couldn't get their heads around. I should say the dispute arose out of a contract where the subject matter was in England. But throughout the whole mediation, they couldn't get their head around that I was neutral. They couldn't believe it. They kept asking questions, well, what's in it for you? If we do a settlement, what will happen? What's in it for you? And I think that was quite a process to sell to them, to have an understanding. I think that's going to be a process. But what I would also say is, and I have experience of working in the Middle East, and one of the things, especially in whether it's in Dubai, I'm going to use Dubai as an example, you have a lot of disputes and you have this idea that mediation isn't used much. And that's true, certainly in the international disputes. And they have this idea that it's not used because mediation isn't liked in the area. And that's as far from the truth as you can get, because in terms of Emirati to Emirati individuals, there is a lot of mediation going on. It's taken a different stance. It's no longer the village elder, the Bedouin elder. It's now actually run out of the Dubai Chamber of Commerce. And they've changed the vocabulary. But what they are doing in terms of Emirati to Emirati, business to business disputes, is they are mediating. They are coming in as someone who can talk to everyone about their problems, about their disputes, and see if they can do something about it. So the short, that's a long answer, but the short answer is yes, why not? I'm going to finish with one final point, that some of the senior mediators who actually worked on the Singapore Convention from the UK when that was done and dusted and signed, and they had contacts with the civil service in the UK, it all coincided with Brexit. And a suggestion was made to the civil service, why don't you use mediators to assist with the Brexit negotiations? And what came back from that was, you must be joking. Ministers know how to negotiate. Why on earth would they need mediators? And I'll leave you to have your own view as to whether the negotiations went well or not. But that was perhaps, it was a real example of where perhaps mediators could have been used. I'm not sure how they could have achieved it, but perhaps different language, different descriptions, and it could have been achieved on both sides.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much. Our time is gone, and I know that even if we had 4 hours, we still would not have enough time. So it's not a question of, oh, we're having to leave because we don't have enough time. There will never be enough time for this. One of the things that will happen in future, and you'll be hearing from us, is we intend to continue to have these conversations on a continuing basis. And I'd like to encourage as many of you to please visit the website and please update us with your contacts so that we can keep in close contact with you. One of the things we intend to do is to have a regular, probably to start with, monthly dialogue and conversation on these matters, because the aim of TDSH is also to bring a transformative impact and influence in the field of ADR. At this point in time, I'll quickly just on my own part say thank you once again to everyone. Unfortunately, I couldn't mention everyone. Please, if I didn't mention your name, like my friend Mr. Vikram Singh from India, Ilan, Bas, and so on and so forth, if I have not mentioned everyone, it's not because you're not important, it's because I need to be mindful of time. And I'd like to say thank you to members of the Advisory Council. I'd like to say thank you to the speakers. I'd like to say thank you to all who have helped us. But before I do that, it's not in my place to give the vote of thanks. I'd like to invite Mr. Bunmi Oni now, who is the chairman of our Advisory Council, and ask him please to bring any closing remarks briefly as we try to close. We apologize, we are 2 minutes past time, but we should not keep you for more than an additional 3 to 5 minutes. Mr. Oni, please. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I won't add to the overrun very much. First of all, is to do the obvious, which is to thank everyone who's taken time to participate. I know that, there are many people who have views who have not been able to express them, but that's only because of the constraints of time. And we always will have time running against us. But it's been such a refreshing thing to see that, well, this is an idea whose time has come. Obviously from all the contributions. And we've seen today also one of the very beautiful elements of mediation, which is that you can look at the same issue from totally different perspectives, and they add up, they come back and add up at the end of the day. Andrew's approach has been sort of different from the approach that I brought in, and that was deliberate, of course. But the point is, from both, things come together almost in a natural way, and really that is the power of mediation. It's as long as you keep the objective in focus, the approach or the precise route can be different. But if you keep the end game or the end point in focus, it's like the GPS that you use in your car. The lady that tells you directions, sometimes you actually take a wrong course, but the lady always recalculates and brings you back on course. So even where things have gone off course and therefore there's been a dispute, there always is a way back. And as long as we focus on that way back, on the destination, then it helps us to to keep in track. And the fact that we all have the same desire to get our lives back, as it were. So there's a life after every disruption, after every interruption, whether or not the interruption is caused from within or from without. So that's been a great day. I'm personally looking forward to many more of this when we'll share the depths of experience and knowledge of many people out there who think in a similar way as we think in TDSH, to bring a revitalization, whether it's from a philosophical point of view or from a pragmatic point of view, to this whole area of helping us to get our lives back. There's no better time for us to do it than in the post-pandemic world. And as we often say in business, seize the moment. This is the moment, carpe diem. This is the moment to seize the opportunity that these routes present to us, so that we can make a better choice, so that, we're better prepared and we are not put apart by any future pandemic that may come. Well, let me thank you very much indeed. Everyone, have a great day. For some of you, it's still morning. For some of you, it's almost the end of the day, but whatever it is, have a great time. Blessings.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Oni there. I'll quickly ask Mrs. Kolade to give a formal vote of thanks, just to round us up, and then we'll be on our way. Thank you once again, Mr. Oni. Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Thank you, all guests and all members of the Advisory Council members. Over to Mrs. Kolade now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Akisanya. Good afternoon, good morning, good day, everyone. We trust that you have had a worthwhile time with us. On behalf of the board and the Advisory Council of TDSH, which is the Dispute Solutions Hub, I would like to say thank you to our speakers, Mr. Andrew Miller, QC, Mr. Bunmi Oni, MFR. Thank you so much for your very insightful presentations. To our able moderator, Mr. Adeyemi Akisanya, whose birthday is today, by the way, so happy birthday. Happy birthday. We say thank you very much for moderating. And to you, our audience, we couldn't have done it without you. We thank you so much, especially those that tuned in from different time zones. Thank you very, very much. We're hoping and we believe that it was well worth your time. We appreciate your taking time out, and we hope you will visit our website and connect with us on this very promising journey in the field of dispute resolution. Please watch our space. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Well, once again, thank you. There's nothing else to say. You can log off as many persons were beginning to do so, but we look forward to seeing you very soon. Please visit our website and watch out for announcements and things like that. TDSH has arrived. Clear the path. And we are here to stay. Thank you very much, and enjoy the week. Enjoy the rest of the year. And for those of us for whom it is relevant, have a very happy Easter break. Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Easter Monday, and energy with back to work. Thank you once again, and bye-bye. While we're still on air, I'll just add a little credit to Digitrack Studios for putting us online and on Zoom for this meeting. Thank you, Digitrack. TDSH is the Dispute Solutions Hub, and the purpose of it is to set an institution where not only can people have an opportunity there to resolve actual conflicts, that is, it's a private mediation center, but it's also an organization that is devoted to promoting mediation as a lifestyle, as a preferred mode of mediation. And as members who attended the webinar this morning may have heard the speakers say, we are hoping to bring a transformative influence to the entire realm of dispute resolution using mediation. And in fact, I did mention while we were in the program that, for example, I believe that even litigation can be affected and influenced by a mediation mindset. TDSH is aiming to help people through the use of mediation to take a new approach to conflict. Conflict not as war, conflict not as quarrel, but conflict just as recognition that we have different opinions and we can come together jointly, consensually, in a conciliatory, friendly, loving manner, find a solution that would be best for the, not just for the parties, but for the circumstances and the situation in which the resolution, in which the conflict arose. So TDSH will not only be a place of resolving conflicts, it will be a place where people come together, exchange ideas, develop thoughts to make mediation a richer process and to make it what I would call the preferred mode of resolving conflicts because of its positive impact on relationships and situations. Mediation is fast. It is often inexpensive, relatively, but not necessarily cheap. But one thing that we're trying to say, as one of our speakers put it, TDSH hopes to encourage people to use mediation to develop a different perspective of conflict, to change our perceptions of what happens when we have a conflict.
TDSH has come to stay. It's actually focused on resolving disputes, but mostly via conflict management and resolution of disputes through mediation method. And what we're trying to achieve is to ensure that, you know, we intend to have like a panel called the Round Table, where neutrals can actually come, register, and the idea is to make sure we have experienced mediators who can assist companies, individuals to resolve either community disputes from commercial people, and to ensure that we use the experience that we have as dispute resolvers to contain as opposed to try to become the client. So the idea is to actually try and ensure that disputes are contained and are resolved in a friendly manner and not to wear the hat of being a litigator, and ensure that litigation, protracted resolution and disputes are reduced. That's really the aim of TDSH, and I believe that with the caliber and quality of the advisory council, we should be able to achieve this.
TDSH is a body that is formed, a new body in the field of mediation, and it has come with a new approach to mediation, which is to transform mediation. The way things are done, TDSH is looking at it in another way, but to achieve the same result, to achieve the same solution, in which case there are certain inhibitions, challenges when mediation is done. So TDHS is looking at a way to overcome those challenges and at the same time deliver the same result. In this instance, it's going to look more critically at the issue of creativity. We want to be creative in the way we handle mediation, both from the aspect of the individuals, the people, and sometimes the process itself. But more essentially, we are going to work a lot on individuals, on the persons, on the parties who do mediation, because sometimes you see that some mediations fail because of fixation of mindset. Somebody comes to mediation and says, "Look, I know it's not going to work, and there's nothing you can do about it." But somehow, with some element of creativity, you are able to refocus the person. That's the transformation this time around. That's exactly what we're talking about when we say that the TDSH has come with a transformational approach to mediation. So it is people-centered, people-centric, and then what are those things that would actually make parties come up with a new way of looking at their dispute, looking at their problems, creating solutions, creative solutions, and in the process. And at the end of the day, the businesses of both those parties would have been transformed. Their activities would have been transformed. The way and manner they approach issues would have been transformed. That is the essence of it.
It's a hub, and it was officially given birth to today. But what we expect is to act as a provider, of dispute solutions, to corporate organizations, individuals, and also help to craft a dispute system design, for organizations. We're very, very particular about the transformative nature of one of the ADR processes, which is mediation. We believe that there is a lot of future in it. We believe that if people are reorientated, they have a better understanding of how to deal with conflicts. So rather than waiting till the end when you have a conflict and there's so many distractions, you can nip it in the bud by having people understand why they need to maintain relationships, why they need to do things in certain ways that will give the conflicts, if you like, a soft landing. We're not saying there won't be conflicts, there will be, but what we're looking at is the outcome of these conflicts, how we can achieve better outcome, and also make people better in terms of their relationships, better in terms of how they do their work, better in terms of their outlook to life in general. Because as we've realized, the world is about people, and so you must take care of the people. And when you don't take care of the people, then you have a problem. You can't do any work without people. You can't do anything without people. So we need to begin to look after people, look after their interests, look after their welfare, look after their being. That is what we mean by this transformation. Let the transformation permeate throughout the lives of people, not just when they have conflict or when they have an issue.
And it's to help parties to resolve their disputes, either through mediation, arbitration, but mainly through mediation, to see how we can have a very efficient way of resolving commercial disputes and sometimes maybe other ones, but basically to make sure that we get business going and add value to companies.